The story begins with the Rachel lies broken amidst the wreckage of her life, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood and the frantic cries of the man she spent a lifetime worshipping. Hendrik, the Duke of Palmagoras, looms over her, his composure shattered as he screams her name, a stark contrast to the cold indifference he displayed for years. In these final, agonizing moments, a realization pierces through Rachel's fading consciousness. Despite her desperate pursuit of his affection, the narrative of their love was fundamentally flawed, though the specific regrets of who truly loved whom drown in the chaos of her demise. She gasps out an apology, her thoughts drifting not to the husband who stands before her, but to her son, Lancelot, urging him to hang on as the darkness swallows her whole. Her mind drifts backward, traversing the currents of time to the origin of her devotion, 13 years prior. She relives the terror of the day bandits besieged her orphanage, the air filled with the shrieks of women and children being dragged away and the ruthless command to seize all valuables. A younger Rachel, paralyzed by fear, prays to God for salvation as the violence closes in. That salvation manifests in the form of Hendrik, who bursts onto the scene with the might of the royal knights, a shining beacon of strength that instantly captivates the 17-year-old girl. In that singular moment of rescue, amidst the chaos and fear, Rachel falls irrevocably in love with the commanding figure of the Duke. This singular infatuation blinds her to all reason when, years later, the opportunity arises to become his wife. The social circles buzz with the scandal that Hendrik openly maintains a commoner mistress named Ari and has declared his intention to never love a wife chosen for politics, viewing her merely as a vessel for his heir. Despite the warnings from her own family that such a union guarantees misery, Rachel eagerly steps forward, her heart deaf to the cruelty of his stance. Her father, resigning himself to her stubbornness, grants permission, and Rachel accepts her fate, naively believing that simply existing by Hendrik's side will suffice, regardless of his feelings. She suppresses the agonizing reality of being treated as a tool, convincing herself she can endure the pain of unrequited love. On the night of their wedding, Rachel waits in the opulent ducal bedchamber, clutching the hem of her nightgown, her heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and bold hope. She attempts to steel herself, rationalizing that she can support him as family even without his romantic love. As the moon rises high outside the window, she anticipates touching the person she loves for the first time, a thought that sends tremors through her. However, the Duke is late, and when he finally enters, his presence is as frigid as the winter wind. Hendrik pins her to the bed without a shred of tenderness, his eyes cold and void of affection. He silences her attempt to speak his name with a rough hand over her mouth, commanding absolute quiet. He delivers a brutal ultimatum. Sharing his bed does not equate to sharing his heart, and he expects no emotional connection to develop between them. He explicitly reaffirms that his heart belongs solely to Ari and that this physical act is a political duty that will cease the moment she falls pregnant or within a month if she fails. Rachel lies beneath him, tears streaming down her face as he refuses to even call her by name, the physical pain eclipsed by the shattering of her heart. Despite the crushing rejection, Rachel clings to her status as his wife, finding solace in the technicality of their union. The freezing disdain of the Duke destroys her naive hope of a warm marriage, yet she persists, enduring 6 failed attempts to conceive before finally becoming pregnant. Throughout the difficult pregnancy, she harbors a foolish hope that giving birth safely might finally earn her husband's acknowledgement. She knows deep down the futility of this wish, yet she cannot extinguish the flicker of hope that he might one day praise her. The birth is dangerous, pushing Rachel to the brink of death, yet when she awakens, Hendrik is conspicuously absent. Instead, her father-in-law and brother-in-law, Kimberly, stand by her bedside, expressing relief at her survival and confusion at the Duke's behavior. Rachel forces a smile for them, thanking them for their support while internally grappling with the stinging reality that the man she loves could not be bothered to witness the birth of his son. She tries to reassure herself that he will be pleased with the boy, who looks just like him. When Hendrik finally deigns to visit, he does not approach the bed to comfort his exhausted wife. He stands at a distance, confirming it is a boy, and coldly states that his parents wanted the successor, implying his own lack of interest. He announces that now the deed is done, he has no reason to visit her anymore. He declares he will return only when the child is old enough for knight training, placing the entire burden of raising the future Duke of Palmagoras on Rachel's shoulders before turning on his heel and leaving. Rachel, left alone with the infant, masks her devastation with a smile, naming the child Lancelot, a hero's name, while unknowingly allowing her unrequited love to twist into a dark obsession. Kimberly offers his support, sensing the abandonment, but Rachel retreats into a shell of duty, vowing to fulfill her role as Duchess perfectly even in solitude. She clings to Hendrik's parting command to raise him well, as if it were a holy scripture, creating a strict and detailed education program for Lancelot the moment he turns 3. Her love for her husband, having nowhere to go, transforms into a curse that she projects onto her son, becoming an obsession she cannot shake. Lancelot grows into a smart, perceptive, but quiet child who rarely smiles. He wonders why his father never visits, knowing the man only through portraits, and questions if his mother hates him due to her severity. When the young boy tries to find moments of respite with his uncle Kimberly, Rachel intervenes with frantic intensity. She drags him away from any semblance of leisure, insisting that a noble must never be late and forcing him into an endless cycle of geopolitics and study. She fires tutors who show him kindness or deviate from her draconian methods, terrified that any lapse in his perfection will mean failing Hendrik. She believes that as long as Lancelot remains an innocent, perfect child, she can maintain her precarious peace, ignoring the reality that children must grow. As the years pass, the toll of this loveless, high-pressure existence manifests physically in Lancelot. By the time he is a young man, he is gaunt and fragile. When he innocently mentions meeting a cute girl with fluffy golden hair during horseback training, Rachel's reaction is explosive. She shuts down his burgeoning romantic feelings with absolute authority, screaming that he must never show interest in a girl of unknown status. She demands he remain pure and beyond reproach, projecting her own anxieties about status and duty onto him, forcing him to waste away under her controlling gaze while she pretends not to notice his suffering. The inevitable collision of these tragic lives occurs when Hendrik returns to the estate, expecting a warrior ready for training but finding a dangerously thin boy. His fury is immediate and directed entirely at Rachel. He berates her for failing to follow his instructions, demanding to know what she has been feeding the heir and questioning her competence as a mother. He stands over her, his voice dripping with venom as he calls her a useless creature whose very existence brings harm to the ducal family. Rachel cowers on the floor, accepting the abuse, but Lancelot, pushed beyond his breaking point, snaps. He steps between his parents, shouting at Hendrik to stop, challenging the man who never once came home to help raise him. Hendrik dismisses his son's defense, telling him he has no right to speak, which drives Lancelot to draw his sword against his own father. In the ensuing chaotic struggle, the blade meant for the father finds the mother. Rachel throws herself into the fray and is cut down, her blood staining the carpet. As she bleeds out, she looks at her weeping son and realizes the profound error of her life. What truly mattered wasn't the distant husband she chased, but the child she failed to love properly. Rachel closes her eyes and accepts death, finding herself floating in a white, empty void. She mourns the loss of her child's warmth, convinced she has passed on to the afterlife. But then, sensation returns. She opens her eyes to find herself back in the bridal chamber, staring at her own unscarred hands. Confusion gives way to shock as she realizes she has been transported back 13 years to the very night of her wedding. She is young again, and most importantly, this is before Lancelot was conceived. The weight of her second chance crashes over her. Time has turned back, offering her a path to rewrite the tragedy. She weeps, not for the husband she lost, but for the son she hasn't met yet. She resolves instantly that this time, she will not seek Hendrik's validation. She will raise Lancelot with all the love in the world, ensuring he knows happiness instead of duty. The door opens and Hendrik enters, playing his part in the script she knows too well. He begins his cold speech, stating that he has something to say and that his love is reserved for Ari. He declares he will never love a woman married for politics. In her past life, these words shattered her, but now, Rachel feels nothing but a calm, detached clarity. She interrupts him, her voice steady and devoid of the desperation that defined her previous life. She agrees with his terms readily, stating that once is enough for the pain he offers. She informs a stunned Hendrik that she has already consulted a doctor to determine the most effective date for conception, aiming to minimize their time together. She assures him that she has absolutely no intention of interfering between him and Lady Ari, and explicitly encourages him to go and enjoy his peaceful days by his lover's side until the designated night of conception arrives. Hendrik recoils, his stoic mask cracking in the face of her unexpected pragmatism. He stammers, asking if she thinks being obedient will make him fall for her, but she cuts him off with a flat denial. She reiterates that she is here solely as a tool to bear a child for the Palmagora's family and wishes for nothing more. She looks him in the eye and asks if this arrangement isn't convenient for him as well, turning his own logic against him. Hendrik stands frozen, unable to process the woman who stands before him, no longer the pleading, love-struck girl, but a fortress of resolve. Rachel turns away, her internal monologue declaring her liberation. She no longer needs his love. From this moment on, she is unbound by him, determined to live by her own will for the sake of the child she will save from their shared fate. Rachel stands firm in her internal fortress, sealing away the naive heart that once bled for the man standing before her. She vows silently to never again yearn for the love of Hendrik, the Duke of Palmagoras, a man whose indifference in her past life spiraled into a tragedy that nearly cost the life of the child he once claimed to desire. With a gaze void of warmth, she verbally releases him, urging him to cease worrying about her existence and to return to the arms of the woman he actually cherishes. She presents a cold, logistical ultimatum regarding their marital duties, reiterating that conception will only be viable on a specific calculated date 6 months hence, a strategic lie to minimize their contact. Internally, however, she calculates the truth, recalling that in the previous timeline, the existence of her son Lancelot was only secured after 6 agonizing attempts. Rachel frames this delay as a matter of mutual convenience, suggesting that limiting their physical intimacy to a single intercalary month serves his interests as much as hers. Hendrik, unable to comprehend this sudden shift from devotion to detachment, recoils with suspicion, accusing her of harboring a hidden agenda. He demands to know what she is plotting, his voice rising in frustration. Rachel remains unmoved, coolly reminding him of the comprehensive background report she dispatched prior to their union, a document he clearly neglected to read. When he admits his ignorance with a scoff, asking if she hides another lover, she simply challenges him to read the report himself, her confidence unshakable. Driven by a mix of confusion and frustration, Hendrik storms out of the mansion, declaring his intent to see his mistress, Ari. His brother, Kimberly, intercepts him in the hallway, questioning his haste and reminding him of the optics of abandoning his new wife on their wedding day. Hendrik snaps back, revealing that Ari herself rejected him, telling him to leave, which only fuels his bewildered rage. As he stomps away, Hendrik's mind reels from the drastic transformation in Rachel. He recalls her former self as clingy and annoying, a stark contrast to the cold, composed woman who now occupies his home. He questions if she has completely changed or if this is some manipulative ploy, warning Kimberly that she is a witch who toys with people's minds before disappearing down the corridor. Kimberly watches him go, resolving not to fall for such characterizations, though he remains perplexed. Later, amidst the manicured greenery of the estate gardens, Rachel hosts Kimberly for tea. He arrives apologizing for the wait, his demeanor stiff and formal. Rachel invites him to sit, noting his hesitation as he initially declines, preferring to stand. She pierces through his polite facade, observing that he seems to be standing guard over her. She directly addresses the tension, assuring him that if he is watching her on behalf of the Palmagoras family, he can rest easy. Internally, she notes that this level of surveillance is new. In her first life, Hendrik never bothered to have her watched, leading her to wonder if his current paranoia stems from a fear that she might bear another man's child to usurp the family line. Rachel confronts the reality of her marriage head-on, confirming to Kimberly that she encouraged Hendrik to leave because he has no intention of returning home. She adopts a mask of weary acceptance, stating that the pursuit of a non-existent affection is simply too exhausting to maintain. Kimberly, taken aback by her resignation, stammers a question of why, before pivoting to apologize for his brother's behavior, acknowledging the suffering she must be enduring. He offers his own limited support, admitting that while he is not the head of the family, he wishes to help in any way possible. Rachel smiles gently, telling him that Hendrik's peace is her only desire, but internally, she recognizes Kimberly's value. In her previous timeline, he was the one who filled the void for Lancelot, playing with the boy when his father refused to exist. Rachel's memory of Kimberly as a surrogate father figure softens her resolve, and she decides to leverage this bond immediately rather than waiting years as she did before. Kimberly, flustered by her intense gaze, assumes he has offended her, but Rachel reassures him, declaring that this time, she will proactively ask for help. She acknowledges the mistake of her past life, where she isolated herself and took Lancelot out without permission, realizing now that the boy needed a male role model in his father's absence. Seizing the moment, she convenes a family meeting, calling for her father-in-law and mother-in-law to join them so she can explain her new approach to her position as Duchess. The elder Palmagoras couple arrives, the former duke reminding her that he is retired and that she, as the lady of the house, holds the true authority. Rachel apologizes for the sudden summons but wastes no time in laying out the stark reality of her situation. She states plainly that while she will soon fulfill her duty to bear an heir, she does not expect Hendrik to return to the household even after the child is born. This admission creates a heavy silence, but Rachel pushes through, declaring that unlike her first life where she tried to shoulder the burden alone, she now intends to rely heavily on the family for support. She formally requests the Palmagoras family's assistance in raising the coming child, framing it not as a favor but as a necessity for the family's future. When the in-laws attempt to apologize for their son's negligence, Rachel stops them, insisting that managing the family is her duty, but she needs their specific strengths. She turns to Kimberly, asking him to remain at the mansion to provide the strength and protection of a man when needed. To her mother-in-law, she appeals for guidance through the trials of childbirth, and to her father-in-law, she delegates the administrative duties of the family for when she is physically incapacitated. The family agrees without hesitation, pledging their complete support, leaving Rachel to lament internally that she should have opened her heart to their kindness from the very beginning. Time shifts to the designated night of conception. The atmosphere in the bedroom is clinical and devoid of romance. Hendrik sits on a sofa, and Rachel thanks him for his presence, stating simply that everything is ready. She notices a distinct change in him. He is far calmer than the rough, aggressive man from her memories of their first time. She speculates that his apathy has deepened to the point where he doesn't even care enough to speak, yet she finds this silence preferable to his previous cruelty. She leads him to the bed, instructing him that he may leave his clothes on, treating the encounter as a medical procedure to be endured. They agree to finish quickly, acknowledging the unpleasantness of the duty, and proceed with a detached efficiency. The calculated effort yields immediate success. Just as Rachel hoped, she falls pregnant on the very first attempt. The household erupts into a flurry of preparation, a stark contrast to the lonely anticipation of her previous life. Kimberly and the retired Duke throw themselves into setting up the nursery, their enthusiasm manifesting in a shopping spree that fills the room with supplies. Rachel watches with amusement as they debate over baby clothes, holding up soft fabrics and marveling at the quality. The two men, usually the picture of stoic nobility, discuss the future with animated vigor. They buy a sword in case the child is a boy, envisioning a strong knight, and a stuffed toy in case it is a girl, vowing to become strong enough to protect her. Rachel laughs aloud at the mental image of these two serious men navigating a baby store, finding joy in their shared anticipation. As the months pass, Rachel's confidence grows. She vows that whether the child is a boy or a girl, she will pour her love into them, eagerly awaiting the moment she can meet Lancelot again. She feels the time drawing near, noting that labor pains have begun on the exact same day as they did in her first life. The physical reality of childbirth crashes down on her, the pain tearing through her body just as viciously as she remembers. She writhes in the bed, gasping for air, the agony stretching into hours that bleed together. Panic begins to set in among the attendants. The labor is taking too long, mirroring the traumatic difficulty of her first delivery. The staff whispers that both mother and child may be in danger, and Rachel's internal monologue spirals into fear, rejecting the possibility that she might lose this chance. Maids rush with hot water, urging her not to push yet, while Rachel grits her teeth, acknowledging that the memory of the pain did nothing to dull its actual intensity. She focuses on her breathing, clinging to the memory that all pain vanishes the moment she sees her baby's face. With a final, earth-shattering effort, she pushes, her scream echoing through the estate. The cry of a newborn cuts through the tension. Lancelot is born, safe and sound. As Rachel drifts into the hazy aftermath of birth, she renews her vow to treasure him, to protect him, and to spend every possible moment by his side, redeeming the time she lost to sadness in her previous existence. She promises to hold him, walk with him, and cherish the miracle God has granted her. Rachel awakens some time later, her body exhausted but her spirit light. She opens her eyes to the familiar ceiling of her bedroom. A voice beside her speaks, noting that she is awake. She turns her head and freezes. Sitting in the chair beside her bed, watching over her, is Hendrik. Shock paralyzes her. In her first life, he never once visited her after the birth, leaving her in total isolation. Yet here he sits, a presence that defies her memories and her calculations. Confusion washes over her as she stares at him, her mind racing to understand why, in this timeline where she pushed him away, he is the one sitting by her side. The atmosphere in the ducal bedchamber is suffocating, thick with the weight of a history that only one person remembers. Rachel watches Hendrik, her heart guarded behind a fortress of resolved indifference, as the scene plays out exactly as it did in her previous life. Hendrik stands with his back to her, his posture rigid, reciting the cold script she knows by heart, that his parents demanded an heir of noble blood, and therefore his father will claim the right to name the child. Rachel anticipates the next beat of this tragic rhythm. He should declare his duty done and vanish from her life for the next decade. However, the gears of fate grind to a halt when Hendrik breaks the established pattern. He pauses, his hand lingering near his sword, and murmurs that this time, he did a bit of thinking himself. Rachel's composure cracks. The deviation from her memories jars her, prompting a confused stutter as she asks if he truly formulated a thought of his own. Hendrik admits that while his father had a name prepared, he had harbored his own desire to name the boy Lancelot. The revelation strikes Rachel with the force of a physical blow. In the timeline she erased, she was the one who bestowed that name upon their son, clinging to its heroic connotations as a lifeline. Now, Hendrik claims the name as his own choice, creating a dissonance that rattles her understanding of the past. They converge on this shared decision, agreeing to honor the grandfather's wish, which conveniently aligns with Hendrik's choice, and name the child Lancelot Palmagoras. Hendrik explains that it is the name of a famous hero and admonishes her to raise the boy to be worthy of such a title. Rachel accepts this charge with a bow of her head, her voice steady as she promises to fulfill her duties so that Hendrik and his mistress, Ari, can live without worry. She expects this submission to be his cue to leave, but Hendrik lingers, his gaze drifting toward the crib with an unreadable expression. The silence stretches, heavy and confusing, forcing Rachel to confront the fact that she can no longer predict his actions. The man who once left without a backward glance now hesitates. Determined to stick to the safety of her plan, Rachel breaks the silence, asking if he is leaving and explicitly telling him to return in 12 years when the boy is ready for night training. She effectively dismisses him, mirroring the abandonment he once inflicted upon her. Hendrik seems to snap back to reality, agreeing that there is no point in worrying since they won't see each other for a dozen years. He bids her a curt goodbye and exits, leaving Rachel alone with the infant, bewildered by the strange, lingering tension that accompanied his departure. Outside in the corridor, the facade of the stoic Duke crumbles into defensiveness. Kimberly and the former Duke await him, and Hendrik reports with clipped efficiency that there are no issues and that woman will handle everything from this point forward. The callousness of his statement, declaring his job ends here, shocks Kimberly, who stares at his brother in disbelief. As Hendrik attempts to walk away, Kimberly's shock ignites into fury. He demands to know if Hendrik truly plans to abandon his own child to run back to his mistress, questioning if he has forgotten that this estate is his home. Hendrik stops, his expression darkening, but Kimberly presses the attack. He reminds his brother that Rachel married him fully aware of his love for another, and therefore she deserves to be treated with care. Kimberly warns him against the fatal error of equating a mistress with a legal wife, trying to appeal to his brother's sense of duty. This provokes a volatile reaction from Hendrik. He rounds on his father and brother, twisting their own teachings against them. He cites the lesson to love only one person, and declares with fanatical intensity that thinking about Rachel disgusts him, while Ari is the only one who holds his heart. Hendrik storms off, leaving his family stunned by his venom. Kimberly, unable to let the matter rest, decides to chase after him. He catches up to Hendrik in the main hall, demanding answers. He confronts Hendrik with the rumors circulating in the capital, whispers that the captain of the knights has been bewitched by a commoner woman. Kimberly demands to understand why Hendrik becomes so emotionally volatile whenever the conversation turns to Rachel and Ari. This confrontation triggers a cascade of memories for Kimberly, pulling him back to the roots of his complex relationship with his brother. He recalls Hendrik's days as a celebrated hero, a warrior who saved his majesty's life and fought to protect everyone. Kimberly wonders where the pride of that hero has gone. In his memory, however, Hendrik is bitter and disillusioned. The older brother rants about the title of hero being nothing more than the result of noble schemes and unwanted attention. Hendrik reveals a deep-seated paranoia, viewing Rachel not as a victim but as a deceiver who trapped him in a marriage to repay a debt. He frames his coldness as caution, a refusal to be led astray from his right path. Kimberly's internal monologue reveals the depth of his inferiority complex. He remembers watching young Hendrik train, a prodigy who was recognized for his swordsmanship from a young age. A flashback shows a sparring match where young Hendrik easily overpowers Kimberly, lecturing him that without a practiced sword, Kimberly would be dead. Hendrik's advice was esoteric and unattainable for a normal person. He spoke of focusing on everything until the sound faded away and the world stopped. Young Kimberly, eager and desperate to emulate his brother, asked how to achieve such strength, only to be met with the baffling assertion that anyone can do it, with enough training. The memory solidifies Kimberly's understanding of their disparity. Hendrik is a genius who operates on a plane of existence Kimberly cannot reach. Kimberly admits to himself that he is terribly mediocre. Despite this lack of talent, he joined the Knights with a pure desire to protect the weak, finding his purpose in welfare activities like guarding soup kitchens and charity events. It is within this context of humble service that Kimberly's memory shifts to a pivotal site. Amidst the bustle of a charity event, he spots a young woman. He notes that, there she is again, implying a history of observation. In his eyes, this girl, likely Rachel, given the context of welfare and orphanages, shines brighter than anyone else in the crowd. This visual anchors Kimberly's moral stance. While his brother is lost in high-level delusions of persecution and heroic burden, Kimberly is grounded by the genuine radiance of someone who simply cares for others. A man's internal monologue drifts through the corridors of his memory, anchoring on a pivotal realization about a specific woman. He admits that he found himself constantly searching for her presence before he even understood the gravity of his own feelings, wondering when exactly his gaze first lingered upon her. The scene shifts to a bright, domestic moment where a young girl holds a basket of cookies, her expression full of wonder as she contemplates a magical concept. She exclaims that these specific treats possess a spell placed upon them. With innocent conviction, she explains that the spell ensures good things will befall anyone who consumes them. A companion chides her gently, reminding her that hoarding the luck is forbidden and that she must share with everyone. The girl deduces that eating a vast quantity will therefore result in an abundance of good fortune. Chaos erupts elsewhere as the logistics of a grand event crumble. A bystander complains about the lack of lively music, demanding to know the whereabouts of the band. A staff member reports a disaster. The road from Shiro town collapsed, creating a blockade that prevents the musicians from arriving. Estimates suggest it will take an hour just to clear the debris. Panic sets in among the organizers, who fret over the unstable situation and the looming cancellation of the concert. Amidst the confusion and despair, a quiet voice interjects with a suggestion. The girl steps forward, offering to fill the silence with her own performance while they wait for the professionals. She humbly admits she lacks the skill of the scheduled band but volunteers to play the violin to salvage the mood. The staff accepts the offer with gratitude, desperate for any solution to appease the waiting crowd. The girl addresses the audience, inviting them to enjoy the interim performance before the main act arrives. She raises the violin to her chin, and as the bow strikes the strings, the atmosphere transforms. Children in the audience perk up, recognizing the melody immediately and asking if they can sing along. She grants permission with a warm smile. The lyrics float through the air, speaking of music making flowers bloom, a metaphor that seems to manifest in the very air around her. Her quick thinking and soothing melody quell the unrest, mesmerizing the onlookers. To the man watching, the sound of her violin evokes the vivid image of flowers blossoming in unison. As the man watches her play, bathed in the soft light of the moment, a heavy realization settles in his heart. He acknowledges that while real flowers do not bloom from music, the sensation she creates convinces him otherwise. He admits to himself that she was his first love. However, the memory is tainted with the bitter knowledge that she fell in love with his older brother. A painful hypothetical plays out in his mind. He wonders if the outcome would have been different had he been the one to save her back then. He tries to dismiss the thought, telling himself it is useless to dwell on the past, yet the name, Kimberly, lingers in his mind. The narrative jumps forward to a strategic conversation between Kimberly and a man, presumably Hendrik, in a formal setting. She probes him for information regarding a scholar named Margaret. Hendrik corrects her, identifying the individual as Thompson, a brilliant scholar who relinquished his title and is currently suffering from an illness. Kimberly expresses her desire to hire a nanny or educator and emphasizes the need for absolute trust. She suggests that the ideal candidate would be someone with deep ties, such as a childhood friend or family member, someone who offers the reliability of a sibling. Hendrik confirms that it is not uncommon for nobles to employ childhood companions as loyal servants, validating her approach. Kimberly takes decisive action, arranging for Thompson and his family to not only work but live within the mansion. Hendrik expresses shock at the arrangement, but Kimberly insists. Soon, the new arrivals stand in the hallway: Thompson, the father, and his two sons, Kurt and Alf. The boys introduce themselves nervously. Kimberly welcomes them warmly, inviting them inside. She outlines her vision to Thompson. She wants him to educate his sons now so that they may serve Lancelot in the future. She calls the boys closer, praising their cuteness, and introduces them to Lancelot, identifying him as their future master. Lancelot, a small child, hides behind Kimberly, shy and uncertain. Kimberly instructs Alf and Kurt to disregard formal distance and instead treat Lancelot like a younger brother. She encourages them to play with him and even scold him if he errs, emphasizing a familial bond over a master-servant dynamic. She reassures the hesitant boys that she will not expel them for petty fights, as she values the development of a trustworthy relationship above all else. The boys, emboldened by her kindness, promise not to fight and declare that little ones are precious. Kimberly then turns her attention to Thompson regarding his health. She acknowledges his illness and declares that the Palmgoras family will shoulder the full responsibility and cost of his treatment. In return, she asks that once he recovers, he dedicate himself to teaching Lancelot. Thompson, overwhelmed by the generosity, agrees. Internally, Kimberly reveals her true motivation, stemming from a past life where she failed Lancelot. She recalls with regret that in her previous timeline, Lancelot lived a confined and lonely existence, surrounded by servants but devoid of connection. She determines that this time, things will be different. She prays that Alf and Kurt will become genuine friends to Lancelot, ensuring he never suffers that isolation again. The narrative establishes the hierarchy of ages. Alf is 8, Kurt is 5, and Lancelot is 4. The scene transitions to the sunny castle grounds where Hendrik practices swordsmanship. Lancelot watches his uncle with admiration, calling out to him. Kurt, eager to participate, complains that it is unfair that only the brother gets to practice and demands to join in. Hendrik gently shuts him down, stating they are not ready for practice yet but permits them to watch. Kurt accepts this compromise cheerfully. From a terrace table, Kimberly, Thompson, and another observer watch the children interact. The observer notes that Lancelot looks like he is having fun. Kimberly reveals a somber fact: Lancelot has never been outside the mansion. She expresses gratitude that Hendrik spends time playing with him, as the boy needs that connection. Seizing the momentum of the positive atmosphere, Kimberly proposes an idea: everyone should go out together on the upcoming holiday. The group agrees, deciding that the next Sunday will be the day for Lancelot to experience the outside world and the town. Later, Hendrik approaches a maid named Ari, who is busy hanging white laundry sheets to dry in the wind. He interrupts her chores to extend an invitation, asking if she would like to join them on their trip to town. Ari, holding a basket, appears surprised by the gesture, noting that it is rare for Hendrik to invite her anywhere. Despite the unexpected nature of the request, she agrees to go. The wind rustles the sheets as the plan for the excursion solidifies. A storm of recriminations descends upon Hendrik Bongoris, an 18-year-old heir whose rigid moral compass has once again collided with the delicate fabric of high society. A senior figure, likely his father or a mentor, demands an explanation for his behavior, asking what on earth he did to warrant such scandal. The accusation is specific and severe. Hendrik is charged with acting rudely toward the daughter of a marquis during a recent evening party. Hendrik, standing tall and defiant in his uniform, feigns ignorance, asking what the accuser means. His internal justification reveals the blunt practicality that defines his character. He recalls the incident as something trivial. The noblewoman had offered him a letter and a handkerchief, a standard romantic overture. Instead of accepting the gesture with grace, Hendrik had simply returned the items, stating plainly that there was no point in accepting things he would not use. The older man explodes at this admission, lecturing Hendrik that even if he intended to refuse, social etiquette demanded he accept the gift first and return it politely later. He argues that Hendrik should have at least sent flowers to soften the rejection rather than embarrassing her publicly. Hendrik retorts that she forced the items on him, and he refuses to engage in conversations filled with lies and sophistry. He questions whether this life of obligation and deceit is truly what he is destined for, even as he is reminded that he will soon inherit the house and the position of Knight Commander. The stifling atmosphere of the lecture hall shatters as the scene shifts to the chaotic freedom of the streets. A cry rings out alerting the knights to the presence of bandits. For Hendrik, this is a welcome escape. He thinks that as long as he can swing a sword, that existence is enough for him. He takes command immediately, ordering his men to catch the criminals while he pursues the ones fleeing toward the slums. He instructs his unit to transport the captured ones to the wagon and to avoid killing if possible. The bandits, cornered in the dilapidated ruins of the slum district, realize they have underestimated the knights. One bandit sneers, asking if this small squad is all that was sent after them. The knights are momentarily overwhelmed, but Hendrik arrives with the force of a tempest. He lands amidst the debris, his cape billowing, effectively saving his subordinates who cry out in relief. The bandits quickly identify him as the only strong threat and formulate a plan to ambush him to take him out. As a bald bandit lunges from the shadows with a blade, intent on a lethal strike, a sudden blur of motion intercepts him. A young girl with short, choppy hair swings a heavy wooden plank with a primal scream. The impact is solid, catching the bandit off guard. He stumbles back, dropping his weapon, shocked by the intervention of this little brat. Hendrik watches, stunned, as the girl stands her ground. The bandit collapses, and Hendrik's subordinates rush in to secure the area, taking the man into custody. In the aftermath, Hendrik looks at the girl, wondering if he was the one who was actually saved. He approaches her, extending a gloved hand, and insists that she needs medical attention. The girl, battered and dirty, rejects the offer with a bright, defiant grin. She thanks him for the rescue but claims she doesn't need treatment. She waves goodbye casually, turning to leave. Hendrik, captivated by her resilience, calls out to ask for her name. She replies simply, Ari. Hendrik notes internally that Ari was the first person he ever took a genuine interest in. The narrative follows Hendrik's deepening fascination as he begins to visit the slums regularly. Ari is shocked to see a knight in such a place, asking what business he has there. In a clumsy attempt at courtship, derived from the lecture he received earlier, Hendrik presents her with a bouquet of flowers. He admits he heard this is what one gives to women. Ari is baffled, asking if he dislikes flowers, to which he replies he doesn't think he does. When she remains confused, he simply states he will come again. Back in the noble district, Hendrik dines with a male companion who questions his recent habits. The companion notes that Hendrik has been frequenting the slums and asks pointedly if he is buying women. Hendrik firmly denies this. His companion lectures him that love should be given only to a true partner and that keeping mistresses is disgraceful. Hendrik agrees with this sentiment entirely. He internalizes this logic, concluding that if he can only love one person in his life, his destined partner is Ari. However, the reality of their connection is forged in a darker misunderstanding. The memory shifts back to a violent encounter in the slums. Hendrik stumbles upon Ari in the grip of a man. Acting on his duty to crack down on sexual assault crimes, Hendrik intervenes, believing she is being assaulted. He pulls her away, but instead of gratitude, Ari explodes in rage. She screams at him, demanding to know what he was thinking. She reveals the crushing truth of her poverty. She was not being assaulted, she was selling herself to that man to survive. She berates Hendrik for bringing her useless flowers that don't fill her stomach while simultaneously ruining the transaction that would have fed her. She cries that it is all over because the man's family runs the area, and they will surely kill her by tomorrow for this insult. Hendrik, realizing the gravity of his interference and the danger he has placed her in, makes an immediate decision. He grabs Ari, hoisting her over his shoulder in a move she calls kidnapping. He asks, how much, and tells her to come with him. He declares the timing perfect. He transports her to a safe, clean residence, informing her that she will live there from today onward. He outlines a regimen of care, a bath, lunch, and a doctor's checkup. He assures her she will be safe in this place. With a finality that binds them together, he tells her, from now on, you belong to me. Ari accepts this new reality with a simple, got it. Reflecting on this past, Hendrik muses that living with Ari was a comfort he had never known. She required no vague or roundabout conversations, reinforcing his belief that she was his destined partner. Years later, he asserts that this feeling has not changed. The scene dissolves into the present day. Hendrik and Ari walk through a bustling town street. Ari points excitedly to a bakery, noting how lively it is. She reminisces that back then, she couldn't tell a bakery from a candy shop. She proudly tells Hendy, her nickname for him, that thanks to the tutor he hired, she has gotten pretty good at reading, though her writing still needs work. She proceeds to read the signs on the shops. A clothing shop, a general store, and a cafe. Suddenly, Hendrik stops dead in his tracks. Ari notices the shift immediately and asks if something is wrong. Hendrik tries to dismiss it, saying it is nothing. But his eyes are locked on a sight across the street. His wife, Kimberly, interacting with others. Ari asks if he saw someone he knows. Hendrik turns away, his face darkening, and tells Ari not to worry about it. Later, they sit inside a quiet establishment. Hendrik is consumed by a dark, brooding silence. His internal monologue turns venomous as he thinks of Kimberly. He refers to her as that witch and wonders if she has deceived even his parents and younger brother with her beautiful smile. A montage of memories floods his mind, distorting Kimberly's image into one of manipulation and coldness. He remembers her telling him she doesn't need his love. He recalls her stating she only married him to repay a favor and that she isn't there to get between him and Ari. To Hendrik, these statements are all lies designed to entrap him. He convinces himself that she is an evil woman through and through. He believes that with her beautiful appearance, she is trying to shake his heart and erase his feelings for Ari. He admits internally that he disliked her from the moment they first met. Ari breaks the silence, hesitantly addressing him as Hendy. She acknowledges it isn't her place to say it, but she suggests that, just for once, he should go back to his wife. She assures him she will be fine. Hendrik shuts down the suggestion immediately, stating it is not necessary. He steels his resolve, telling himself he must not let his heart be stolen by the witch. He vows that this will never change and that he must not be swayed. He looks at Ari and declares, "You're the only one for me." Ari accepts this with a quiet, "I see." Hendrik concludes that this stubborn adherence to his narrative is the only way to protect true love and his own heart. Lancelot bursts into the room, his small voice echoing with excitement as he calls out to his mother. Kimberly looks up, surprised by the sudden intrusion, and asks for the reason behind his energy. Lancelot insists that he desperately wants to see what she does for work. He explains that his curiosity was sparked the other day when he witnessed people thanking her during their outing, making him wonder about the nature of her duties. Kimberly permits him to watch but establishes ground rules immediately. She instructs him that he must not raise his voice while in the room and is strictly forbidden from interrupting when adults are speaking. Lancelot eagerly agrees to the conditions, promising not to get in the way. Kimberly turns to Margaret, requesting that she stay in the room to keep a watchful eye on Lancelot. Margaret acknowledges the order with a bow. Kimberly pats her son on the head, praising him for being a good child, and asks what he is holding. Lancelot proudly presents a book about various jobs, clarifying that it is not a mere picture book. He explains that his desire to learn more about the people working in the city led him to ask his teacher for help in choosing this specific volume. Satisfied with his answer, Kimberly asks Margaret for a moment of private conversation. Lancelot, undeterred by the adult talk, announces his next ambition is to see the marketplace. Margaret steps aside with Kimberly and confides that she had planned to report this sooner. She notes that the book Lancelot reads is quite difficult, especially considering he hasn't officially started his studies yet. She reveals that her husband, Thompson, was astonished by the boy's aptitude, remarking that it seems as if Lancelot already knew everything beforehand. She explains that Lancelot proactively approached her husband to ask for reading assistance and absorbs information with terrifying speed. Kimberly watches her son read on the sofa, realizing he is a child who learns freely and naturally without the need for strict control. Overwhelmed by emotion, she wipes a tear from her eye. The moment is interrupted by a knock at the door. A servant asks if it is a good time to enter. He enters with a stack of reports. The servant presents the documents, which include a response to a petition regarding northern flood control and a tax estimate for the territory. He then places a sealed letter on the desk, stating it is specifically for the madam. Kimberly thanks him for his work and picks up the envelope, wondering about the sender. She examines the handwriting and realizes the sender has never written to her before. The signature reads, Hendrik Bongoris. The letter states that he will be coming to the main estate on his next day off, which Kimberly realizes with horror is tomorrow. She questions the suddenness of the visit. As she reads further, the contents shock her. Hendrik writes that per their agreement, they must try for another child. Kimberly recoils, questioning why this is necessary when they already have Lancelot. She interprets this demand as a sign that Lancelot is somehow not enough in Hendrik's eyes. Kimberly makes a swift decision to protect her son. She orders Margaret to take Lancelot to the secondary estate the following afternoon. Turning to Lancelot, she apologizes, claiming that urgent business forces her to go somewhere, and asks him to play with Alf and Kurt instead of her today. Lancelot agrees cheerfully. Internally, Kimberly resolves that she must never meet Hendrik alone, fearing that despite the different timeline, the risk of angering him remains. Kimberly rushes to her father-in-law's quarters, knocking urgently. He invites her in, identifying her as Rachel, and immediately asks what is wrong upon seeing her distressed state. Kimberly apologizes for showing him such a disgraceful side of herself. She explains her fear that meeting Hendrik alone might result in conflict. Her father-in-law deduces from the letter's mention of trying for a child that Hendrik plans to return to his duties. Kimberly requests that both he and Lord Kimberly be present during the meeting to support her. However, the older man refuses the request. He argues that since the letter was addressed solely to her, it is better for them to speak one-on-one to ascertain Hendrik's true intentions. He advises her to focus on herself and dismiss other worries, promising to inform Kimberly when Hendrik returns. Kimberly leaves the room, her anxiety unquelled. She feels a gnawing sense that something is missing, despite having sent Lancelot away to safety. A nightmare consumes her. Kimberly sees a vision of her former self lying broken and bloody on the floor. In the vision, Lancelot screams, "Mother!" while the current Hendrik covers his face in anguish. The scene shifts to reveal her father-in-law discovering Hendrik's lifeless body slumped over a desk. Another image shows Kimberly dead in a hospital bed, with someone murmuring "mother-in-law." The realization strikes her with devastating force. If she and Hendrik die, Lancelot will be left completely alone. She questions if even Lord Kimberly faces this fate and screams Lancelot's name into the void. Kimberly jolts awake in her bed, shaken by the realism of the dream. She realizes that what she lacked was true resolve. Though she thought she had steeled herself when time turned back, she now dedicates herself fully to protecting Lancelot's future, refusing to let that tragic timeline come to pass. The chapter concludes with the title, "I Don't Need Your Love." The scene shifts to a bright, bustling day in the town. Lancelot runs through the streets with his arms wide, declaring the family outing amazing. Kimberly agrees, noting the large crowd. She takes the opportunity to teach Lancelot about noblesse oblige. She explains that the charity event represents the duty of nobles to contribute to society and set an example through their actions. Hendrik walks beside her, blushing slightly. He mentions that he happened to see her handing out cookies in the Clock Tower Plaza a few times while he was on patrol in the past. Kimberly is surprised he knew about her charity work. Kurt interrupts the moment, shouting that he wants to eat some cookies and asking Kimberly if she can make them. Lancelot joins in, expressing his desire to try his mother's cooking. Kimberly modestly admits she isn't very skilled and only knows simple recipes from the chef. Lancelot turns to Hendrik, asking if Uncle wants to try them too. Hendrik flushes and stammers a shy agreement. Kimberly claps her hands, proposing a solution. They will all learn together from the head chef next Sunday and make cookies as a group. The children cheer, "Yay!" and Lancelot beams, telling his mother he loves her. In the afterword, the artist Aradama Rand thanks the readers for purchasing Volume 1. The artist credits Tuma-sensei for helping deepen the understanding of the characters, particularly Hendrik, which aided in adapting the story into manga form. In the opulent, high-ceiling drawing room of the Palmgoras estate, the air hangs heavy with suffocating tension as Rachel prepares for a confrontation she has dreaded since her return to this timeline. She reflects on the stipulations of a contract, her mind racing with the obligation to visit the main estate on holidays to discuss the matter of an heir. The mere thought of the sudden demand for a child sends a tremor of shock through her, the absurdity of receiving such a letter leaving her bewildered. She attempts to steel herself, drawing a fragile comfort from the knowledge that her father-in-law and the maid, Kimberly, stand as silent sentinels within the room to ensure her safety. Despite her fear, a steely resolve hardens within her. She determines that she must refuse the request, anchoring her defiance in the existence of her son, Lancelot, rendering the demand for another child illogical and unnecessary. The heavy double doors swing open, announcing the arrival of Duke Hendrik, the head of the Palmgoras family and Rachel's estranged husband. He strides into the room with a casual, almost languid air, apologizing for his lateness while adjusting his cuffs, his demeanor starkly contrasting the anxiety radiating from his wife. He acknowledges the others in the room, his father and brother, confirming that the plan for the moment is merely to observe the proceedings. Rachel stands rigid, her hands clasped tightly before her elaborate gown, while Hendrik's father, the former duke, greets his son with a cold formality, demanding to know the meaning behind the sudden summons. Hendrik takes his seat, his expression impassive as he faces the scrutiny of his family. He wastes no time with pleasantries, reiterating the contents of the letter that had caused such distress. With a chilling detachment, he declares his desire for another child, stating plainly that he intends to procreate with Rachel. The statement hangs in the air, a blunt instrument that confuses the former duke, who questions the necessity of such an act given that Lancelot already secures the lineage. Hendrik's reply is immediate and dismissive. He repeats his demand as if the existence of his firstborn is a trivial detail to be brushed aside. The former duke, his brow furrowed in disbelief, presses for clarity, unable to comprehend the logic behind Hendrik's words. Hendrik, however, twists the knife of confusion further by asserting that while the new child will biologically belong to him and Rachel, the upbringing will be entrusted to his lover, Ari. He claims, with a disturbing lack of self-awareness, that Rachel is already occupied with raising Lancelot, implying that this division of labor is entirely rational. This declaration sends a shockwave through the room. Rachel's eyes widen in horror, and the former duke's posture stiffens as the sheer audacity of the proposal becomes clear. Rachel, her voice trembling, questions the logistics of this twisted arrangement, asking why Ari does not simply bear the child herself if she is to be the mother figure. Hendrik's response is a cold slap to the face of noble tradition and marital sanctity. He declares his love for Ari to be pure, untainted by the job of child-making, effectively reducing his wife to a biological vessel. He looms over Rachel, his gaze piercing as he reminds her of her title and duty as the Duchess, framing her submission to his will as a mandatory role she must fulfill. The tension in the room snaps. The former duke, unable to tolerate the disrespect leveled at his daughter-in-law and the blatant neglect of his grandson, clenches his fist until the knuckles turn white. He declares his absolute refusal to allow such a travesty, stating that he cannot trust a man like Hendrik to raise a child properly given the current circumstances. Hendrik, momentarily taken aback, looks at his father with genuine confusion, as if the moral outrage is a foreign language. Before Hendrik can process the refusal, the former duke explodes into motion. With a roar of fury, he launches himself across the gap, his fist connecting violently with Hendrik's cheek. The impact sends Hendrik staggering back, the force of the blow echoing through the grand hall. The former duke stands over his son, his chest heaving, and unleashes a torrent of admonishment. He accuses Hendrik of acting the hero for public praise while neglecting his responsibilities at home, succumbing to lust, and ignoring the existence of the child he already has. Hendrik, clutching his bruising jaw, attempts to defend himself, shouting that his father has misunderstood his intentions, but the patriarch cuts him off with a thunderous command for silence. The former duke points a shaking finger at the door, ordering Hendrik to leave the estate immediately, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. Hendrik, realizing the futility of further argument, turns on his heel and exits, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. As the heavy doors close behind the exiled duke, the atmosphere in the room shifts from volatile rage to heavy sorrow. The former duke collapses onto a sofa, burying his face in his hands, muttering apologies to Rachel for the shameful display and the trap she finds herself in. Rachel, though shaken, attempts to maintain her composure, assuring her father-in-law that she is fine and that she accepted the terms of the marriage when she entered the family. The former duke laments that they cannot simply remove Hendrik from the family register due to his status as a national hero and the king's likely intervention, a political reality that binds them to the man despite his behavior. Hendrik's younger brother, who had watched the altercation with a pained expression, speaks up, offering a glimpse into the past. He recalls a time when Hendrik was different, socially clumsy and unable to offer polite platitudes, yet possessing a quiet strength and intelligence that commanded respect. He notes that Lancelot shares this clumsy nature, a resemblance that Hendrik completely ignores. The brother reminisces about the Hendrik who would smile awkwardly in return to a kindness, a sharp contrast to the cold, delusional man who just left the room. He observes that Hendrik used to perform his duties as the head of the house perfectly, never paying attention to other noble ladies until he met Ari, marking the turning point in his character. Approaching the window where Rachel stands, the younger brother offers a sincere apology on behalf of his brother, acknowledging the pain Hendrik's actions have caused. He validates Rachel's silent grievance, confirming that Hendrik never once spoke Lancelot's name during the entire exchange, a fact that Kimberly had also noted with disdain. This acknowledgement serves as a catalyst for Rachel. She realizes that she is the only true parent Lancelot has, and she must remain strong for his sake. The younger brother, seeing her resolve, pledges his support. He states his belief that Hendrik is unlikely to return and expresses his desire to help watch over Lancelot's growth, asking Rachel to rely on him more. Rachel, touched by the offer, beams with a renewed sense of hope, agreeing that a child benefits from having more adults to care for them. She reflects internally that she is no longer alone as she was in her previous life. This time, she has the support of her father-in-law, mother-in-law, and Kimberly, a coalition of allies that strengthens her spirit. Meanwhile, in a modest townhouse far removed from the noble estate, Hendrik arrives at the doorstep of his lover, Ari. The night is dark, and he stands looking disheveled, the red mark on his face clearly visible. Ari opens the door, startled by his appearance, and immediately asks what happened. Hendrik, looking utterly bewildered, recounts the events, explaining that he simply told his family he wanted to raise a child with her, and for reasons he cannot grasp, everyone reacted with anger. Ari, wiping a plate as she listens, pauses and looks at him with a mix of incredulity and pragmatism. She points out the obvious flaw in his logic. Asking a wife to bear a child for a mistress to raise is naturally going to result in a physical altercation. She admits she can completely imagine the confusion and rage of his family, validating the punch he received as a natural consequence of his absurdity. Hendrik remains deeply confused, questioning if he made a mistake, insisting that his only desire was to have a child. He stands in the dim light of the entryway, his expression one of a man who is completely detached from the emotional reality of those around him. Ari, with a sigh, cuts to the heart of the matter. She asks him pointedly that if he wants to live with a child so badly, why he doesn't simply return to the estate, reminding him that he already has a son waiting for him there. Hendrik's eyes narrow, and he firmly rejects the idea of returning, leaving the question of his motivation and his sanity hanging in the damp night air. The evening air grows crisp as Rachel prepares to depart the Palmgora's estate, the weight of her social obligations settling upon her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Standing in the warm glow of the manor's entrance, she turns to her son, Lancelot, and the maid, Margaret, who stands dutifully by his side. Rachel informs them that the ball will likely run late and instructs Margaret to ensure Lancelot retires to bed at a reasonable hour, not waiting for her return. Lancelot, brimming with youthful energy, beams up at his mother, bidding her goodbye with a cheerful enthusiasm that tugs at her heartstrings. Rachel, masking her reluctance to leave, gently admonishes him, warning her son not to use her absence as an excuse to stay up past his bedtime. With a final wave, she steps away from the domestic sanctuary, steeling herself for the performance required of a duchess. As the carriage rumbles into motion, the interior is filled with a contemplative silence broken only by the rhythmic clatter of wheels against cobblestones. Seated across from Rachel is Kimberly, her brother-in-law, who checks his device before glancing up with a look of concern. He inquires if Rachel has received any correspondence from his older brother, Hendrik, regarding his attendance at the evening's festivities. Rachel, her expression composed but her eyes revealing a trace of resignation, confirms that no reply has come, noting that such silence is entirely normal for her estranged husband. Sensing her underlying disquiet, Kimberly gallantly offers to serve as her escort for the night if Hendrik fails to appear, though he notes he had already reminded his brother of the event. Rachel accepts his offer with a graceful nod, expressing her gratitude for his steadfast support. Rachel's mind drifts backward, traversing the currents of time to the era before everything rewound. She recalls the bitter sting of those past gatherings, where she would distance herself from her in-laws and Kimberly, choosing to attend events in solitary misery. The memory of running away, feeling isolated and pitiful while laughter echoed behind her, remains vivid and sharp. She remembers the taunts, the voices questioning if she had been abandoned, and the overwhelming sense of self-inflicted wretchedness. However, the Rachel of the present is forged from stronger steel. She centers herself with a renewed resolve, acknowledging that back then she was desperate for Hendrik's acknowledgement, but now her priorities have shifted fundamentally. She tells herself that socializing is a duty for the Palmgora's family name and, ultimately, a necessary maneuver to secure Lancelot's future. With this conviction anchoring her, she feels capable of handling whatever the night may throw her way. Upon their arrival at the grand venue, the atmosphere shifts instantly from introspection to the chaotic hum of high society. Almost immediately, Kimberly is besieged by a flock of eager noblewomen, their voices rising in a chorus of delighted squeals as they vie for his attention. They swarm him, clamoring for dances and conversation, their aggression forcing him onto his back foot. Kimberly, looking flustered and apologetic, glances back at Rachel, attempting to decline the deluge of invitations by citing his duty to escort her. Rachel, however, recognizes the social dynamics at play. She smiles gently and dismisses him, assuring him that she is fine and urging him to go ahead and entertain the gathering crowd, effectively releasing him into the fray. Left to navigate the periphery of the ballroom alone, Rachel observes the scene with a practiced detachment. She notes how people naturally gravitate toward Kimberly, a testament to his charisma and standing. Her solitude, however, is short-lived. A group of noble ladies, their faces masked in veneers of polite concern, descends upon her like vultures spotting a wounded animal. One of them feigns surprise, remarking that she had forgotten Rachel's face because she attends these functions so rarely. Another chimes in with lacerating pity, lamenting how sad it is that Rachel never attends a ball with her husband. They encircle her, their words dripping with faux sympathy as they speculate that she must have been too embarrassed to show her face while her husband ignored her. Rachel stands her ground, her expression unyielding against the tide of malice. She perceives the venom hidden within their concern, but chooses to deflect it with cool logic. The women escalate their attack, bringing up a popular romance novel circulating in town. They gleefully inform Rachel that the novel, which features a knight captain modeled after Hendrik and a commoner heroine, is causing quite a stir, insinuating that art is imitating the scandalous reality of her marriage. They ask pointedly about the villainess who interfered between the lovers, casting Rachel in the role of the antagonist in her own life story. Rachel counters calmly, stating that a novel is merely fiction and asserting that with the support of her in-laws and Kimberly, she is perfectly fine even without her husband's presence. Frustrated by her composure, the gossipers change tactics, aiming their poisoned barbs at the one relationship Rachel holds secure. A blonde woman with a fan leans in, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. She claims that Kimberly has been complaining about the burden placed upon him, alleging that Rachel leaves the care of her son to him while she focuses on her work. They assert that Kimberly avoids tea parties precisely because he is so overwhelmed by these imposed duties. The accusation strikes a nerve. Rachel questions the validity of this claim, asking if Kimberly actually said such things. The woman retorts that the information comes from a reliable source, a fellow knight, and insists that Kimberly is genuinely upset. For a fleeting heartbeat, doubt fractures Rachel's confidence. She wonders if it could be true, if the sincere and kind Kimberly she knows has been secretly venting his frustrations to others. The thought that she might be burdening him, that the person she relies on most views her as a nuisance, threatens to unravel her composure. She recalls his plea for her to rely on them more, clashing violently with the rumors now being whispered in her ear. However, rationality quickly reasserts itself. She realizes that these women heard this secondhand from other knights, not from Kimberly directly. Firmly, Rachel declares it a mistake, refusing to believe such slander against her brother-in-law without direct proof. The confrontation reaches its boiling point. Rachel, her voice hardening, challenges the women, stating that what they are implying is false. The blonde woman bristles, indignantly asking if Rachel is calling her a liar. Just as the tension threatens to spill over into a scene, a booming voice interrupts the standoff. The former Duke of Palmgoras, Shalman, looms behind the group of gossipers, his presence radiating authority. He mentions hearing his son's name and asks if something has happened, his tone leaving no room for deception. The noblewomen, realizing they have been caught harassing the daughter-in-law of the Duke, instantly wither, stammering apologies and retreating with hasty excuses. Rachel turns to see her father-in-law and mother-in-law standing like guardians at her back, their support tangible and immediate. Before the family can fully regroup, a hush falls over the ballroom. The king has arrived. The crowd parts as the monarch approaches the Palmgoras group. He greets the former duke with familiarity, addressing him as Shalman and noting that it has been a long time. The king glances around, his eyes scanning the group before asking the inevitable question, "Is Hendrik here?" Shalman, bowing his head in embarrassment, apologizes profusely, confirming his son's absence. The king waves off the apology with a magnanimous air, stating that if a man is strong, a little rudeness can be forgiven. He emphasizes that Hendrik's service as the strongest knight holds significant meaning for the kingdom, serving as a deterrent to other nations simply by reputation. The king then turns his gaze to Rachel, recognizing her as the daughter of the Count of Schlingen. He acknowledges that she, too, has likely been helped by Hendrik in the past, a statement Rachel politely affirms. The king continues, remarking that while Hendrik can be difficult, Rachel was likely drawn to him when she saw him wield a sword, and he urges her to continue supporting him. Rachel curtsies and agrees, though the interaction underscores the vast gap between the public perception of Hendrik as a hero and the private reality of his neglect. The king departs, noting with a touch of nostalgia that it feels like 20 years have passed, counting the time before the rewind. The night concludes with the Palmgoras family departing in their carriage, the rhythmic swaying of the vehicle lulling them into a state of shared exhaustion. Rachel sighs heavily, admitting she is completely drained. She remarks that she now understands why Hendrik avoids social events, realizing the sheer physical and mental toll they exact. The conversation shifts to lighter topics as they anticipate their return home. Rachel mentions checking if Lancelot is sleeping properly. Her mother-in-law chuckles, predicting that the boy is likely staying up late with the servants, Alf and Kurt. Rachel expresses surprise at this insight, to which her mother-in-law laughs and reveals that Rachel was exactly the same as a naughty child. The shared laughter fills the carriage, dispelling the lingering tension of the ball. The carriage travels through the dark, wooded path, the scene fading into the passage of time. 3 years drift by in the narrative flow. The scene shifts to a bright, sunlit day. A young boy, Lancelot, now older and visibly stronger, stands panting from exertion, likely having just finished a training session. Kimberly stands with him, praising the boy's progress and assuring him that he is doing well. Lancelot, wiping sweat from his brow, looks up at his uncle with a mixture of hope and anxiety. He asks if his mother will be happy with his progress. Kimberly, smiling down at his nephew with genuine warmth, reassures him without hesitation. He tells the boy that although she may not have shown it before, she will definitely be happy, affirming the bond between mother and son that has become the cornerstone of their lives.